Hello, and welcome to this Data Lake panel discussion at the Snowflake Data Cloud Summit 2020. My name is Dinesh Kulkarni, and I'm a Principal Product Manager at Snowflake. It is my pleasure to welcome Data Lake practitioners and experts from two of our key customer organizations, Airlines Reporting Corporation, or ARC, and Athena Health. We have two different architectures represented here. The first one that Athena Health has is Snowflake as a data lake. And the second one that ARC has is Snowflake augmenting a blob store-based data lake. Before we start the panel discussion, a few logistical items. This is a pre-recorded session, but we do have team members taking audience questions during the broadcast. So feel free to type them in the chat box. So my first question is really, could you please introduce yourself to my esteemed panelists? Let's start with Mustafa.
Thank you, Dinesh. So my name is Mustafa Ghazi. I'm a solution architect at Airlines Reporting Corporation, ARC. I've been with our company a little over 6 years. ARC provides innovative distribution, data, and payment solutions to the air travel industry. We connect the air travel community, including airlines, travel agencies, and technology providers, to do business together more effectively and accelerate growth while creating a better experience for travelers. In 2019, ARC managed more than $97.4 billion in transactions between airlines and travel agencies, representing more than 302 million passenger trips.
So my name is Dave Meeks. I'm a senior technical architect within the Athena Health organization, specifically with the Athena Intelligence portion of that organization. Athena Health partners with medical organizations across the country to drive clinical and financial results. Our vision is to create a thriving ecosystem that delivers accessible, high quality, and sustainable healthcare for all. And we are pursuing this through our medical record, revenue cycle, patient engagement, and care coordination service offerings. Our expert teams build modern technology on an open, interconnected ecosystem, yielding insights that make for a difference for our customers and their patients.
I work closely with Dave Meeks. I've been with Athena about 6 years. I am the Director of Product Management, primarily focused on the data lake work.
Thank you, Mustafa, Dave, and Hua for joining us today. It's great to have you with us. So let's start with a brief overview of your data lake architectures, just the location, the business purpose, file formats, ingestion versus what's left in the lake, etc. Could you please start, Mustafa, and describe what you do at ARC?
Sure, thank you. So about 3 years ago, ARC embarked on a journey to modernize our technology stacks. Previously, ARC was operating on a lot of interdependent legacy systems. The goal was to evaluate everything we have and start building from the ground up a more robust and efficient architecture that we can leverage to serve our customers with greater speed and flexibility. With our data at the center of this, we decided to establish a data lake that serves as our single source of truth for all global airline sales data. Having all data in one central location enables us to efficiently serve that data to ARC's wide array of data products. With that in mind, we wanted to ensure a scalable architecture that minimizes, or better yet, eliminates vendor dependency. So this led to our current architecture of our data lake. In very simple terms, it consists of Parquet files on object storage, which is AWS S3 in our case. That said, Snowflake plays a key role in this architecture. ARC receives global airline sales data from several sources, such as airlines as well as travel agencies. The data consists of multiple and different formats. We stage those on S3, then leverage Snowflake to extract and transform the data, applying our business logic as well as data models, and eventually land that within our data lake as Parquet files. In addition to that, we leverage Snowflake external tables and materialized views to serve those Parquet files to different data marts, which in turn power a wide array of data products available to different customers.
And how about Athena Health, Dave?
Yeah, so similarly, we started our data lake journey roughly 3 years ago with a pretty simple mission. To unlock the vast network of Athena data to really better service the needs of the broad array of doctors, practitioners, and patients. We started with a very small set of high priority ROI-driven use cases and expanded our capabilities as we grew. Currently, to give you an idea of the scope of that, our data environment includes a mixture of structured, semi-structured, and unstructured data. It includes 20,000 Oracle instances for the primary application data, hundreds of other sources for back office IT systems such as Workday, Salesforce, and Eloqua, dozens of disparate application data stores within our application microservice network, and numerous log ingestion streams, all of which make their way into our data lake. That data lake today is currently at around 200 trillion rows, 600,000 total tables across 600 databases when you include both dev and production, totaling roughly 10 petabytes in total data under management. And we process tens of billions of new change data events every day. All of this data is servicing roughly 100 different projects within Athena, directly involved in solving core business problems around the areas of analytics, reporting, and especially machine learning. Overall, our data lake is a polyglot source of truth for the comprehensive mixture of Athena data. It's sourced in a combination of AWS S3, Azure Blob Storage, and predominantly Snowflake. Snowflake is the center of focus for our source of truth. We also have a wide variety of what we call data ponds. It'd be more traditionally considered data marts, derivative data sets, taken from the combination of those sources of truth and made available through a variety of secondary data stores, including Snowflake, but also including other data stores such as Elasticsearch, Druid, and many others. Our primary data ingestion pipeline is a massively parallel, custom-built combination of Python and AWS components, orchestrating ETL processes to move data from Oracle and all these other disparate sources into Snowflake. We are currently building our next generation pipeline using CDC-style extraction mechanisms, such as Oracle Golden Gate for big data, Debezium, and others, to bring data into S3 and apply business logic and custom transformation and load capabilities, moving that data from AWS S3 into Snowflake. We also have a variety of secondary data ingestion mechanisms, specifically for a variety of back office systems, Workday and others, that are using Informatica IICS or SQL Server SSIS. For data transformations, we have a custom-built AWS-based transformation and orchestration pipeline that coordinates the execution of a variety of database queries against the data contained within the data lake. Additional transformations, especially when we're off hosting that data into data ponds outside of Snowflake, are again managed largely by Informatica. And finally, similar to ARC, we have customer-focused data offerings that we provide via the Snowflake data sharing capabilities, where customers can directly access their data to support their own initiatives around visualization, analytics, and data warehousing.
That's a great overview, Mustafa and Dave. Let's move on to the next sort of common question that we get. Usually these designs are based on a set of principles, and that helps guide the whole project. What were some of the guiding principles that led you to this data lake design pattern? Let's start with Hua for Athena Health.
Sure, happy to. So Dave touched upon a little bit of here, right? So Athena has about 1,500 R&D team, hundreds of analysts. We've got about 100 different projects using Snowflake. So there are really two guiding principles when we start this journey. One of them is to think about how do we centralize the core data lake infrastructure, having one single team own it, understand the ownership, user management, security, compliance, corporate data policies, et cetera, et cetera. But then we want to quickly get everyone to adopt and use data lake, right? The strategy was centralize the core infrastructure and then decentralize, what Dave was talking about, the data ponds. So those are individual projects, their data management and potentially their ETL into the data lake to contribute to the overall data lake as well. So that's really one of first principle. The second one, it's no surprise. What we wanted to do was making sure we identify useful business use cases. Dave talked about direct ROI. That's what we wanted to make sure we do that. We start small, not a big bang effort. The immediate goal is not to bring all the data into data lake. It's really to start with the useful data that has the ROI and then iterate over that. We want to really make sure we take a pragmatic and agile approach to building a data lake.
That's a great set of principles to keep in mind for sure. Mustafa, how about the principles that you used at ARC?
So looking back at ARC's journey to establish our data lake, there were a few priorities that we kept front and center. Scalability was one of the key features we looked at. We wanted to ensure that our architecture sufficiently meets our data needs to be able to efficiently serve our customers. The travel industry is constantly evolving and our architecture needs to keep up with that demand. We also wanted to ensure that our ability to pivot was not compromised. This means our design can shift directions with regards to any of the tools and technologies we are leveraging without requiring major efforts in the process. This minimized out dependency on any specific tool or technology and allowed us to focus on getting the job done. Another critical item that we looked at was the ability to migrate our new design using an incremental approach. It is important to note that we decided to not lift and shift our legacy data warehouse. Instead, we remodeled our data from the ground up. It was a long journey, but certainly worth the effort. All of these principles helped us establish our current data lake design, but as we know, it is one thing to get the data there and another to get the data out. That is why our design included a subset of data marts that serve different business units based on the need. This provided us with a modular approach that helps us not only provide a more performant environment, but also extensible in the sense that many of our data consumption patterns are leveraged by different teams within the organization.
The other question that comes up after guiding principles often is, what are the key personas or roles that are managing the data lake architecture? How about that at Athena Health, Dave?
So when we started the Data Lake Initiative, it was primarily driven around the needs of a couple of particular personas or areas, namely around an engineering-oriented set of capabilities in analytics, reporting, dashboarding, and a burgeoning area at Athena around data science and machine learning. As such, our original efforts were really driven from the engineering organization, so it was an engineering-centric approach. Initially, we started this within an existing analytics organization, but because of those initiatives and the importance of those, especially around data lake and data science, we created a new organization with the specific responsibilities around those two areas. Initially, we started this journey thinking that the team would handle all aspects of the data lake, from administration security to data ingestion transformation to visualization reporting and governance. However, we quickly realized that the needs of the organization, the success of the platform, required more rapid acceptance across a greater portion of the community and understanding of that technology across a variety of different groups. As we grew and the scope of that usage of the data lake expanded, we evolved our thinking into sort of a two-tier model where we centralize administration, security, and the overall evangelism of the data lake within our team. But we decentralize the ownership of individual initiatives, data sets, and subject matter expertise down to the teams needing those capabilities and that they have the actual inbred knowledge for that. So we set up a governance practice around the virtualized concept of a project, which involves specific business justifications and authorization, provides teams with an initial set of resources, a set of databases, roles, warehouses, and resource monitors in order to provide a relatively self-contained, self-managed effort that the individual teams could work with. Each project requires a specific SME contact who is granted an admin level role to allow for delegation of responsibilities and assets within their project, and a specific contact for us to work with at a higher level. Now, as we've continued to grow the scope of responsibilities around the data lake, and especially as we've brought into play other personas and roles around the organization, including sort of generalized analyst, customer support, finance, IT, and even sort of consultant usage, this centralized, decentralized approach has actually proven very successful for us to be able to manage that at scale without having to have the undue burden or sort of single point of contention within our organization.
How about ARC, Mustafa? What were the key personas there?
So from a data lake development and management perspective, the landscape of data lake ownership evolved as ARC made progress towards our current data lake. From inception, we decided to follow an agile approach of standing up different pods or teams that consist of different expertise such as developers, data engineers, automation engineers, and solution architects. This agility and team independence helped us tremendously in providing all the necessary resources to achieve our goals. And as I mentioned earlier, we were doing a complete overhaul, not just on the underlying technologies, but also data models, ingestion patterns, and consumption patterns. So as a result, we initially had different teams that were responsible for migrating different pieces of our data into Arc's current data lake. As those teams came close to completing their goals, we consolidated and combined those teams and resources, moving on to the next laid out phase. In other words, as initial development work is completed, we teamed up to do more enhancements and management of the data lake. From a consumption strategy, our data products portfolio is handled by different teams as well, or teams, I should say. Each product team also consists of a wide array of resources of different expertise. Their focus is to work on the architecture necessary for their data products, which would typically include consuming data from the lake into their data mart.
I see. That's a fairly comprehensive way of thinking about the personas. I'm sure many in our audience can relate to that, and maybe some of them can take away some of these as tips. Moving on to kind of the success metrics, clearly you don't embark on that larger project and keep it on track and make it successful without having some detailed metrics. So let's talk a little bit about the qualitative results and metrics that you set up and that you've been using to measure success, as well as any other things that have impact the process and the culture change and those kinds of things that you've decided to cover. Let's start with you, Mustafa. What were the key qualitative results and process and culture change things that you were tracking at ARC?
So that is a great question. There's no doubt that ARC's new architecture is much more efficient and performant. With our new approach of leveraging data marts as intermediate step between our single source of truth on the data lake and our customer-facing data products, we're able to see significant performance gains. Many of our customer reports or extracts that used to run in minutes are now running in seconds, and reports that once took hours to complete are now running in just a few minutes. In addition to that, we can fulfill new customer requests much faster. For example, in some of our data products today, we can provision new customers in a matter of minutes. More importantly, though, our new architecture fosters a culture of collaboration among ARC's teams. Many of our architectural patterns are leveraged independently, but in similar ways for different areas of our business. This helps us to be consistent, efficient, and most importantly, effective in delivering value to our internal and external customers.
And how about Athena Health? Rod, do you have a take on how that, what kind of metrics and qualitative results you had?
Sure. So I'm a product manager. We are all about metrics. So really I think there are two areas if you think about Athena and particularly Athena Intelligence. Yeah, we are a platform as a service. So, what Dave said, we serve the larger R&D community, the analytics communities. And the other is that we have our own products that's client facing, similar to what Mustafa was saying before. So as a platform service, the number one thing we look at is usage. We look at across the board, who's using it, how often, either service users, bill users, name users. Those are things we track. So right now we're about 500 monthly active unique name users across the board, 100 projects, as Dave mentioned. The one thing that we're also extremely conscious, and this is really a culture shift to your point, Dinesh, cost, right? Scalability is no longer an issue. Typically when we do R&D projects or software development, we think about alpha, beta, GA, and there's a point where you have to think about scalability. Usually from the beta perspective to GA, that's where you're going to do your scale. That's no longer the case. You can deploy and it will work. However, The opposite, then you have to pay really attention, which is the culture shift, is how much is this going to cost once you scale. So we develop lots of metrics, dashboards to make those costs highly visible to all the R&D teams. We have roadshows, we have dev seminars to teach them how to do performance management, right? Optimization. We give them cues on whether they need to do ad hoc, troubleshooting immediately for performance issues that will, obviously lead to cost issues. And then also deliberate cost optimization engagements, looking at individual teams, looking at pipeline, understand where things are, and then make sure those things get fixed, part of their backlog. So that's really from a platform as service. We evangelize the platform, we ensure that performance is doing well, but also from a cost optimization perspective. The other area is, we have client-facing product building on top of the data sharing capabilities and so forth. For there, it's fairly typical. We look at, how much data set is being used by clients. How much time does it take to extract that data, to create this data marts? So from the time we extract out of systems to client usage, what is that? Historically, we had issues of expanding our data sets that our clients can use due to the scalability issue. And that's not there anymore. So we really want to look at now time to value, time to expand the data sets. How much can we increase our clients' access to Athena data? Along with the typical sort of client usage information we talked about, monthly active users, queries we run. And lastly, as a product manager, I have to say we track P&L across the board for those client-facing products. So that's probably the number one metric that everyone cares about.
That's a lot of great insights. It's just wonderful to hear how the different organizations look at it, and yet there are some commonalities. This just having the set of metrics that are always tracked and making sure that they're very closely tied to the business. So thank you for calling those out. We're almost in the last phase of this. So for those who have not yet started the data lake journey, and there are many in the audience who are looking to start that, some are moving from on-prem to cloud, some are on the cloud but are building their data lake. What would be the one piece of practical advice that you would give to those who haven't started that journey, and from what you've learned at Athena Health's successful data lake project?
Sure, happy to. I think we've touched upon this point throughout the conversation. I would say the one piece of practical advice I would give if you're just starting a data lake is really do not do the big bang, avoid it. Big bang efforts usually fail just because there's large upfront costs. There's long period development with no results to be shown in between, no ROI. Don't do that. I would identify, direct ROI initiatives, use the agile development methodology, right? Really get your stakeholders engaged, show results as quickly as possible, build the MVP to solve a specific use case. And then particularly if you have a legacy system you're trying to replace or augment in some cases, think about what the legacy system can't do today, what value it cannot unlock. Use that as the driving force to build your new infrastructure and demonstrate that capability of the new infrastructure. That's going to get you a long way. That's going to get you organizational awareness, get credibility and adoption, and then you grow the ecosystem. So that's the one piece of advice I would give it to everyone.
That is indeed really important. We've seen a lot of failed projects, especially with the erstwhile technologies that people tried to use, and they weren't really successful. Many factors come in, as you pointed out. That's really interesting. So moving on to Arc. Similarly, there are many customers who've already started their data lake journey, but that are still sort of in the earlier stages and still moving forward with lots of decisions to make. What would you, Mustafa, recommend to them? What is one piece of advice that you would give to them?
I would say do not lose track of the big picture. The ultimate goal of a data lake is to build a solution that is capable of handling complex and various business data needs. As you focus on your current requirements and goals, keep an open mind to the endless possibilities of how your data can be used in the future. Try to remain flexible as you continue your journey. Predicting the future of your data will help create a robust solution for your organization. Another important thing to mention, do not be afraid to course correct if necessary. Minimizing any potential technical debt can help reduce your overall timeline significantly.
That is a really interesting piece of advice, especially do not be afraid to course correct. This is not a project that you can envision in its entirety. And clearly those corrections are required when you realize that certain things are suitable or new technology comes along. So thank you very much for covering these things. For the audience, you've seen a lot of these nuggets in this discussion. There are multiple ways to get a data lake right. And Snowflake enables you to pick the one that matches your needs and organizational constraints. You saw that Arc does it with a blob store-based data lake where Snowflake augments the data lake, and Athena Health primarily uses Snowflake as a data lake. So there are multiple ways to get to success, but it's also important to not, as Hua said, not to go for the big bang, to have clear ROI for the new projects and use them as a way to launch your effort and to keep it on track. We also heard from Mustafa how they did some remodeling and didn't just do a lift and shift, and used it as an opportunity to really help the business move forward and not just do the same thing that was done before. And that is why they've been able to have this kind of faster fulfillment. As Dave earlier mentioned and Hua mentioned, scale is really not a problem with cloud. Cloud technologies enable you to do that, but you do have to do cost management. And that is really important to keep in mind. And you should ask all your vendors, including Snowflake, how they're helping you do the cost management, keep track of it, have your metrics that align with that. Also, you heard how important governance and specific roles and tracking the key metrics are in ensuring that your project is successful. So I would close by saying that please look at these two examples of success as deliberate efforts. These are not things that just happen. These organizations put a lot of thought into it, and we've got the top experts telling you how they were successful, how they managed that whole journey. So I would urge you to take a look at what they've done so far, take a look at other successful projects, and not be afraid to experiment and still have the metrics and other things to keep it on track and course correct, as was mentioned by our speakers. So thank you very much, Mustafa, Dave, and Hua, for joining us today. We really appreciate you sharing your insights. I'm sure our audience will love that. Thank you, and enjoy the rest of the conference.
Thank you, Dinesh. It was a pleasure speaking with you.
Yeah, thanks, guys.
Thank you. My pleasure.